Good afternoon. Your market news now. Asian share markets and oil prices slipped as investors fretted about the economic fallout from fresh COVID-19 restrictions in China. Beijing's most populous district urged residents to stay at home as the city's COVID-19 case numbers rose and the first deaths in China were reported since May. Locally, private hospital operator Netcare saw a jump in profits in its full-year financials and forecasting higher revenue and total patient days for its 2023 year as the COVID-19 pandemic fades. And then Barloworld will unbundle its stake in car hire firm Avis SA and list its car rental and leasing business, which includes Avis and Budget separately on the JSE as the Zeta Group next month. The Zeta Group will list on the main board of the local bourse on December 13th. To talk to us about the latest when it comes to the markets, we are joined by Patrice Rousseau, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investments. Patrice, thank you so much for your time. Given a little bit of what I've described in terms of, some of the concerns around China and the rising COVID cases, what else is driving our markets, especially local markets, and some of the sentiment thereof?
Yeah, good afternoon, Anastasia, and to your viewers. As you said already, it's really China. We've had the US close on Friday, so we didn't get any direction from there. Post the Communist Party meeting, I think there was some positive sentiment that maybe there was going to be no radical shift in policy. But I think what's occupying everyone's mind is, as you mentioned, the first few deaths from COVID and the fact that the Chinese government had vowed that they would not see a rise in COVID cases and in deaths, which means that there are serious concerns that they might go again into lockdown. Bear in mind that over the first few months of the year, they had quite stringent lockdown conditions. People were kept indoors and activity had slowed down. So if they go back into that type of very harsh lockdown regime, that will have some after effects. Obviously, we've seen commodity prices today pulling back. I mean, they account for 80% of commodity demand in most of the industrial commodities. We've seen a bit of a pullback in Tencent, which led to Naspers down about 1.5% on our bourse. So it's resources impact and Tencent and Chinese play impacts on our market that is really worrying market participants this afternoon.
Locally on the Stock Exchange News Service, we had results out of Netcare, Astral, as well as Barloworld. Which one of those caught your attention?
Yeah, Netcare, good numbers, as you mentioned, up 9.5%, share price pop 2.8%. Barloworld may be the one which was beaten down given its exposure to yellow metals in Russia. Again, quite a huge pop on results, 9.1%. They announcing a special dividend, as you say, unbundling of some of their operations. Most of the viewers would know of Avis. So trying to streamline the business, focus on core businesses, and really the numbers surprising on the upside. In this environment, I think getting a special dividend is almost a sure return of capital, and the investment community like that from Barloworld.
Right. So, let's take it to last week. We started off the week getting comments out of the Fed Deputy Chair, Lael Brainard, talking about where she sees interest rates going. Over the weekend, we had Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic saying that he's ready to move away from, the 75 basis point increases. But, we'll still see increases as long as inflation is as high. How are you interpreting some of these comments coming out of the Fed officials?
Good points. I think market participants, especially the bond market in the US, were very, very bearish because inflation had reached 40-year highs and there was no end in sight. The last few weeks, we've seen retail inflation starting to stabilize and moderate, really. Still very high, close to 8%, but going in the right direction. Producer price inflation going the other direction. And immediately, the bond market started anticipating, instead of the 75 basis point jumbo hike, a 50 basis point hike. And I think more importantly, it's looking forward and saying the Federal Reserve might do 50 50, maybe another 50 into the new year, and probably pause, which is leading to positive sentiment. And then looking further forward towards mid-year, there's this so-called Fed pivot, which simply means that maybe the Fed at that point in time, if the economy is slowing down, if inflation is under control or closer to the 2% mark, they will start to think about cutting rates. So we're quite far away from there, but I think, as you mentioned already, the fact that Fed governors are talking about slowing the pace of rate increases, 50 basis points, not 75, is pushed the market to be more optimistic in the US and globally last week.
While we're on the topic of central banks, let's throw forward to our Reserve Bank on Thursday. They're going to have their interest rates announcement. What are your expectations going into the Thursday announcement?
Yeah, our Reserve Bank governor is in a tricky position because we've got one last meeting this year. As mentioned, even if the Fed does 50, they might have another hike into December, whereas our Reserve Bank, the last meeting for the year. So in our anticipation is that it might be a hike of 75 basis points, just so that we don't fall behind the curve, we don't fall behind the actions of the Fed, and then that will give us some breathing room. Of course, we have seen inflation starting to roll over, so that's also positive. So it all depends what the Reserve Bank models are saying. So 75 basis point would be on the cautious side for the Reserve Bank to hike. Obviously, let's see what the SPI numbers are on Wednesday as well. That might give us a clearer indication of whether it's 50 or 75.
Patrice, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. That is Patrice Rousseau, who's the Chief Investment Officer at Ashburton Investment, giving us his perspective on the markets and, of course, throwing forward to that Thursday MPC meeting, which we will have the full coverage and analysis for you in terms of what it means for you and I, depending on which way the Reserve Bank governor does go. But that is it from me. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more news for you. Stay tuned.